One problem we've always had shooting photos and video on an iPhone is the lack of a long-range telephoto. Well, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, if you happen to have an iPhone 15 Pro Max, then you have the 5x tele, and that does work really well, but it's the worst camera and lens on the phone, and so it suffers in low light, and the image quality just isn't quite as good as the main sensor. Well, that's where an external lens like this new one from Sandmarc comes into play. This is a 6x telephoto from Sandmarc, and it really gives you a long range. The build quality is really good. It's made out of metal. It's actually got a focus ring on it too, which is interesting. And this turns out to be good and bad, and I'll get to that later in the video, but that makes it feel more like a traditional lens. And then other than that, it just comes with a lens cap for the front and a cap for the back. And it also comes with a carry bag and a zippered pouch, just like all the other Sandmarc lenses. One note though, this lens does not actually accept an ND filter. Or if it does, maybe they have a specialty one, but to my knowledge, you can't easily attach one to this lens. And so I went out and shot some stuff with the lens, including video and photography. And so first up, we'll look at some video test footage. Here is a wide shot, just the normal 1x lens, a 24mm. And then here's the 48mm, the 2x. And now here is the 5x. Again, this is built into the phone. And now here is the 6x. This is on the 1x lens on the iPhone. And so you can see that you really get a long range look here. It also has great compression, and you get a lot more shallow depth of field. The problem though I found is I mentioned it has a focus ring. You've got to really nail the focus to make it look good. And when you do, it can look great. But I have found it kind of challenging to nail that focus. If you have an app that has peaking on it, I absolutely recommend using peaking. But a lot of apps that I've used, the peaking doesn't work great with an external lens for whatever reason. Blackmagic in particular, you lose the peaking. And even though it's in focus, it's just not as sensitive. It's contrast based, so it's just not as sensitive as I would like. The one thing you can also do is you can put the 6x on the 5x, and again, you get a really long range looking shot. Now, it's not as sharp as I would like, and there is a little bit of chromatic aberration, at least in my test footage. However, for certain things, again, if you're doing maybe a documentary or a sporting event or something, and you need that really long range shot, then this could be a good option for that. Your footage won't be perfect, at least again, in my experience, but it is something you could never achieve before on an iPhone. The other thing I did is I'm using the main 1x 24mm, but on the iPhone, since the 14 Pro, you've got the 48mm, the 2x built in. And so having that lens on the main camera, you can punch in 2x, and again, you can get some really long range telephoto footage. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the minimum focus distance is 16 feet. Yeah, you heard that right, 16 feet. So anything closer to that, you will not be able to get focus. The shots I've been showing so far, I'm probably 20 or 30 feet away. And that's really the idea behind the Sandmarc lens. You're getting shots from far away. The other thing I should mention is you really can't shoot handheld. Now, I'll show some photography later, and I did manage to get some handheld there, and that can work. But really, you need to be on a tripod, and in particular for video. And you really need a heavy-duty tripod. I shot some stuff out at the lake, and I had a fairly light tripod, and it was kind of windy, and the shots were moving, mainly tilting up and down. So some of these shots aren't tack sharp. Again, you really got to hit that focus, but when you do, it can look very good. And it is kind of cool that you have a manual focus, because that way you could essentially do a manual rack focus with the lens. Just beware, because the lens is so long, when you do the rack focus, when you're touching it, it can cause shake in the image. Now here are some photos I shot, and again, nothing special here, just some test shots, but I shot with the iPhone native 5x lens, and then I used the Sandmarc 6x to show side by side. The biggest difference you'll see really is that with the Sandmarc 6x, you do get some nice shallow depth of field. However, the only thing, again, just like with video, you've got to nail that focus. And so it almost reminds me of using a DOF adapter. because you're having to touch the screen in focus and then also adjust the actual focus on the lens. And so it can be a little bit tricky. I did run these shots through Photoshop, and for the most part, I'm pretty happy with them. Especially again, because you're getting that really long range telephoto look. So who is this for? Well, to me, it's for people that maybe shoot news, documentary, wildlife photography perhaps, or anyone that needs a long range telephoto. In particular, if you have an older phone or you don't have the latest Pro Max with the 5x. I've heard that it works fine on the 3x lens on the Pro or the previous generation phones. I don't have one available to test it out. However, if you do have an iPhone 15 Pro Max, then you probably don't need this lens, unless again, you want to use it on the main sensor, which is a good idea. But the 5x lens, for the most part, I found the images are a little crisper. You just don't have the same shallow depth of field, but you do get focus proper every time. Now, again, if you want to spend the time and you have a tripod, then you can get some really cool looks. And as a matter of fact, looks that you normally would never see on an iPhone. And so that's one thing that I really do like about it. And if you hit that focus, it can look really good, but often you'll miss the focus. And so when you're running and gunning, that can be tricky. So you really need to have more time. Again, you got to be 16 feet away or more, and you need a tripod. But overall, I would recommend it for those looking for that unique long-range telephoto look on an iPhone that you've really never been able to get before. And in particular, because you can get shallow depth of field as long as you hit your focus properly. That is the key. So if you're interested in one, I've got a link in the description. Thanks for watching. This is Blake Calhoun. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.